The morning Dara Weston decided to stop fighting. It was raining so hard the gutters on Bragg Boulevard were running like rivers. She had parked her 10-year-old Civic 2 blocks from the VA outpatient clinic and walked the rest of the way through the downpour, with one hand pressed over her left ear. The one that had been bad since the blast, as though she could hold the cold out by force of will. By the time she pushed through the glass doors of Perkins Corner, the small civilian diner, tucked into the lobby of the clinic's administrative annex, her shoes were soaked through, and her name badge read, Weston, D. Patient Services Admin, in letters that had faded to near nothing from too many washings. She was 29. She looked, most days, like someone's tired older sister, the kind of person whose face you'd struggle to recall an hour after meeting her. That was fine. Dara had spent the last 3 years learning how to disappear. She found a two-top by the window, ordered black coffee she could barely afford, and kept her eyes on the rain-streaked glass. Around her, the morning crowd shuffled in and out. Retirees picking up prescriptions, nurses on break, a cluster of young soldiers from the post waiting on a buddy who'd gone in for his annual physical. Nobody paid her any attention. That was how Dara liked it. The stillness lasted 11 minutes. "Excuse me," the voice came from her left and was the particular kind of loud designed to make other people look. Dara didn't look. She already knew the type. Stuart Gans was 54 years old and had never in his adult life waited for anything he wanted. He owned the largest commercial real estate firm between Raleigh and Charlotte, dressed in Italian wool even in August, and had the specific brand of confidence that comes from never having been told no by someone who meant it. He stood beside her table now, with 2 associates in tow, gesturing at the empty chair across from Dara with a ringed hand. "This booth fits 4. You've got 1 cup of coffee and no appointment. Some of us are actually here on business." Dara looked up slowly. "I'm waiting for the rain to ease before I walk to the admin building." "Well," Gans glanced at his watch, an obvious performance. "I have a 10 o'clock with the clinic director. Maybe you can find a stool at the counter and let the adults get to work." A couple of heads turned. A nurse near the coffee station looked at her shoes. A retired staff sergeant 2 tables over folded his newspaper very carefully and said nothing. Dara's jaw tightened. She reached for her coat, which she had draped over the empty chair. She was not going to make a scene. She had made a promise to herself 3 years ago, on the tarmac at Landstuhl, that she would not spend whatever life she had left making herself smaller to accommodate people like Stuart Gans. And here she was, making herself smaller to accommodate Stuart Gans. She had just gotten her fingers around her coat collar when the front door opened. The bell above it didn't just jingle. It rang out with the kind of authority that made the whole room go quiet before anyone even turned to look. The man filling the doorway was built on a scale that seemed to belong to a different era. General Harmon Adler stood 6'3" in his Army service uniform, broad-shouldered, white-haired, with a chest so covered in decorations that the ribbons caught the overheads like stained glass. His face was the face of someone who had made decisions most people couldn't imagine, and had lived long enough to carry the weight of every one of them. His eyes were the pale, pewter gray of winter sky before a storm, and they moved through the room with the controlled, deliberate sweep of someone who had spent decades scanning environments for threats. At his left heel walked Ajax. The dog was a German shepherd of uncommon size, 90 pounds of muscle and training sheathed in a coat of black and sable. He wore a tactical vest marked Reddard MWD Do Not Proch, and he moved with a precision that made the air around him feel different, denser, more serious. His amber eyes swept the room in a slow, methodical arc. He made no sound. Stuart Gans straightened his cuffs. His brain, always running calculations, registered the uniform, the rank insignia, the potential utility of being seen in conversation with a 4-star general in a room full of VA stakeholders. He smoothed his tie and stepped forward with his hand extended. "General Adler, Stuart Gans, Pacific Meridian Properties." "Sir, it's an honor. I was just heading over to the director's office. If you're looking for a table, I'm sure we can arrange." General Adler did not take the hand. He did not look at the hand. He did not acknowledge Stuart Gans in any way that a human being can be said to acknowledge another human being. His gaze had moved past Gans the moment the man opened his mouth, and it had come to rest, with a precision that felt almost surgical, on the woman at the two-top by the window. He took in everything in a single pass: the faded badge, the soaked shoes, the coat half pulled from the empty chair, the tight, controlled set of her jaw that was the face of someone who had practiced not reacting to things that deserved a reaction. General Adler walked past Stuart Gans as though the man were a pillar. The room tracked him the way. Rooms track something rare and slightly dangerous, the silence spreading outward in a ring from where he walked. He stopped at Dara's table. Ajax stopped beside him, perfectly aligned, amber eyes resuming their scan. Dara looked up at the general. Her face did not change, but something behind her eyes shifted, the faint, involuntary recognition of someone who had lived a long time in close proximity to this particular kind of authority. "Is this seat taken?" Harmon Adler asked. His voice was a low, even baritone that carried without effort. Dara blinked. "I was just leaving, sir. You can have the table." "I didn't ask about the table." His tone was not unkind. It was simply precise. "I asked if the seat was taken." A sound moved through the diner, not a gasp exactly, more like the collective exhale of a room that had been holding its breath. Stuart Gans had gone the color of old putty. "Of course," Dara said quietly. "Please." The general sat. He ordered black coffee from a waitress who forgot to write it down and had to come back twice. He folded his large hands on the table and looked at Dara Weston with the unhurried attention of a man who had learned not to waste his looking. "You have a particular quality," he said after a moment. Dara kept her eyes on her mug. "Sir?" Most people, when they see the uniform, they either come to attention or they come to pitch something. He glanced briefly in the direction Gans had retreated to. "You just look tired. It's a specific kind of tired. I've seen it in people who've been somewhere they couldn't talk about and came home to somewhere they couldn't explain." The stillness between them held for a long beat. "I work patient intake," Dara said. "Administrative." "I know what it says on your badge," Adler replied. He said it the way someone says something when they already know the next 3 sentences and are giving you time to catch up. Then Ajax moved. The dog had been in perfect sphinx position beside his handler's chair, eyes moving through the room in the slow, methodical pattern of an animal trained to do it automatically. He had been still the way very well-trained things are still, with visible effort, with discipline that was almost architectural, and then he stopped being still. General Adler's hand shot toward the dog's vest, an instinct born from years. "Ajax Platz." The command for down, sharp and clipped. Ajax did not comply. The retired military working dog stood, took 2 careful steps toward Dara's side of the table, and lowered his great head. A sound came from him that was not a bark and not a growl. It was something anterior to language, a low, wavering whine that sounded simultaneously like a question and a recognition. The room froze. Dara went completely still, hands flat on the table. She had not been this close to a working dog in 3 years, and her body remembered it in ways her mind was still catching up to. Ajax pressed his nose against her left forearm, against the sleeve that always covered the scars from the second detonation. The one she never talked about, the one that had ended her career and her previous life in the span of 40 seconds. Then the dog settled his chin on her arm and looked up at her with eyes that were incongruously soft for an animal trained for war. His tail moved once, twice, in a slow and mournful rhythm. General Harmon Adler sat across the table, looking as though the floor had tilted under him. "In 22 years, he said, and his voice had changed entirely, the command register gone, something much older in its place. "I have never seen him do that. Not once. Not with anyone." Dara's throat had closed. She could feel the dog's warmth through her sleeve. She could feel the old scars underneath. "Why is he doing this?" she asked, and her voice came out smaller than she intended. The general reached into the breast pocket of his uniform jacket. His hands, the hands of a man who had written orders that moved armies, were not entirely steady. He produced a photograph, military-issued, slightly worn at the edges. He set it on the table and slid it toward her. The woman in the photo was young, maybe 25, in army combat uniform, kneeling beside Ajax in a dust-colored landscape that could only have been somewhere near the Panjshir Valley. She was grinning at the camera. She had her father's jaw and her father's gray eyes, but the expression on her face was entirely her own. Open, unguarded, alive with the specific joy of someone who had found exactly the work they were made for. Dara's hand came up to cover her mouth. On the bottom right of the photograph, in faded ink, was a date. 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days ago. "My daughter," General Adler said. His voice was careful and controlled the way voices are when they're the last thing a person is holding on to. "Lieutenant Nina Adler. She was in a convoy, on Route 7 outside Cherakar, when the lead vehicle hit a pressure plate." He paused. The blast flipped the Humvee she was riding in. She was trapped. A secondary device was building. Her team had taken casualties, and there was no one who could reach her. The smell of burning fuel and superheated metal was suddenly so present in Dara's memory that her hands began to shake. "A combat medic," Adler continued, "broke from cover, reached the vehicle under active threat, cut through the doorframe with a rescue tool, climbed inside a Humvee that everyone else had assessed as non-survivable, and performed field surgery for nearly 4 hours, using her own body as a brace when the frame shifted until the medevac bird arrived." He stopped. The operation was classified. The convoy was carrying assets we cannot discuss publicly. The after-action report was sealed by order of JSOC. The medic's identity was redacted from every document I was permitted to see. Dara was crying without having made a decision to cry. The tears came quietly, the way tears do when you've spent years learning to grieve without any excess. "Nina is alive," Adler said. "She's stationed at Bragg right now. She's been promoted to captain. She asks me once a month if I've found the woman who saved her life." He reached across the table, slowly, and placed his hand over Dara's. Ajax was in the rear security vehicle. He watched the medic work on Nina. He watched them carry her out on a stretcher, and he watched them carry out the medic who went back to check on a secondary casualty and was caught in the third detonation. His jaw tightened. A dog's nose carries memory in ways we don't fully understand. "He didn't just smell you today, Ms. Weston. He smelled the person who put her body between his handler and the fire." The diner was so quiet that the rain against the windows was the only sound left in the world. Dara pressed her palm against Ajax's head. The dog made a small sound deep in his chest and leaned into her. It took her several minutes to speak. The general waited with the patience of a man who understood that certain moments could not be rushed. "I didn't save her," Dara said finally. I didn't leave." That, Harmon Adler said, is the definition. He let her breathe. He ordered a second coffee. He waited until the color had come back to her face before he asked anything else. It was Dara who eventually broke the quiet. "You didn't come in here for the coffee, did you, General?" "I tracked your schedule," he admitted. "I've been sitting outside in my car for 40 minutes, trying to decide how to approach you without frightening you. Then I saw that man at your table." His expression, for just a moment, said everything about Stuart Gans that needed saying. He left before I had the chance to address him properly. At the mention of Gans, something shifted in Dara's posture. She looked toward the window. Outside, a county vehicle had parked across the street, municipal seal on the door. "He'll get what he came for whether you addressed him or not," she said. "The county commission meets at noon. Gans has been lobbying them for 6 months to rezone this annex." She gestured at the building around them. Luxury condominiums. The VA clinic relocates to a main campus 40 minutes away, which means 32 administrative staff lose their positions and several hundred veterans lose their nearest intake point. She paused. "I'll find something. But some of these men and women, they don't drive anymore. They don't have people to drive them. This clinic is the difference between someone getting their benefits processed and someone just giving up." General Adler's expression had not changed. His eyes had. "The land this building sits on," he said. "Who deeded it?" Dara blinked. "The Army Corps of Engineers. during the base expansion in the 60s. Why? The general was already reaching for his phone. He made 3 calls in 12 minutes. Dara watched him and did not speak because she had been around enough command-level authority in her life to know that the right thing to do when a general was making calls was to stay out of the way. When he set the phone down, he looked at her with the particular calm of someone who has just made decisions that carry real weight. "Finish your coffee," he said. "We have a county commission meeting to attend." The Fayetteville Municipal Building was mid-century brick, efficient and unlovely, 3 blocks from the old market house. The second-floor meeting room smelled of stale coffee and bureaucratic certainty. Stuart Gans stood at the head of the conference table beside a scale model of his proposed development. 48 luxury units, a rooftop amenity deck facing the river, and he was explaining, in the measured, reasonable tones of a man who had already won, why the reallocation of this particular parcel represented an opportunity the county could not pass up. The 5 commission members were nodding at intervals. The doors at the back of the room came open without a knock. Gans turned. General Harmon Adler walked in first, in full dress uniform, medals bright under the fluorescence, a JAG officer at his right shoulder carrying a briefcase that went on the table with a sound like a gavel strike. At the general's left heel, Ajax, and through the door behind them, her VA badge clipped to her lapel, her face composed and still, came Dara Weston. "I have an objection," Adler said. The room's acoustics did the rest. Gans's scale model sat between them on the table like a bad joke. General Adler, the commission chair, a woman named Patricia Odom, found her voice first. "This is a closed session." "Then open it." He placed both hands on the table. The parcel in question was deeded to Cumberland County by the Army Corps of Engineers in 1961 under a federal covenant requiring the land be used in perpetuity for veteran health services. The covenant was never formally vacated. Mr. Gans's attorneys appear to have overlooked that clause or found it inconvenient. He nodded to the JAG officer, who opened the briefcase. "Federal injunctions, signed this morning by Judge Randolph Freese of the Eastern District. They freeze all rezoning proceedings on this parcel indefinitely. Additionally, the Army Inspector General's office has opened a preliminary inquiry into Pacific Meridian Properties regarding material misrepresentation in their submissions to this commission." The color left Stuart Gans's face in a single, visible wave. He looked at the injunctions. He looked at the general. He looked at the woman, near the door, who was watching him with the quiet, level gaze of someone who had outlasted considerably worse. He picked up his jacket. His 2 associates gathered the architectural renderings. The scale model caught on the edge of the table as they moved and tipped, and no one bothered to catch it. After he was gone, the room was very quiet. Adler straightened and addressed the commission in the measured cadence of a man who had given many important statements and knew how to give them well. "The clinic is not closing. As of this morning, I have secured a partnership between the Army Wellness Foundation and 3 private defense contractors to fund a complete renovation of this facility. The new center will offer expanded physical rehabilitation services, mental health integration, and a certified canine-assisted therapy program for wounded combat veterans. It will be named the Nina Adler Center for Veteran Recovery, in honor of an officer who came home from a place she couldn't talk about and chose to keep serving anyway." Commission Chair Odom had her hand over her mouth. Adler crossed the room to where Dara stood near the door. He went down to one knee, a 4-star general, deliberate and unhurried, so that they were at the same level, and he spoke quietly enough that only she could hear. "A center like this needs a director of rehabilitative services. Someone who understands what it means to be broken in ways that don't show on a scan. Someone who knows how to be in the room with a person at their absolute worst and not look away." He met her eyes. "Your body took damage, Dara. Your judgment and your nerve are entirely intact. Will you consider it?" She looked at him for a long moment. She looked at Ajax, who was watching her with his amber eyes as though the question had already been settled, and he was simply waiting for her to arrive at the same conclusion. "Yes," she said, "I will." Adler nodded once, a small, complete motion. Then he reached down and unclipped Ajax's leash from the tactical vest. He placed the end of it in Dara's hand, the worn nylon warm from where he'd been holding it. Ajax completed his final deployment assessment 14 months ago, he said, standing. He was formally retired from service as of this morning. He needs someone who understands the particular difficulty of transitioning from a role that defined you to a life that has to be rebuilt from nothing. A pause. I believe you understand that better than most. Ajax took one step toward Dara and set his chin in her hands. His tail made a slow, quiet arc against the carpet. Through the tall windows of the Fayetteville Municipal Building, a strip of pale November sun had broken through the overcast and was moving across the floor in the unhurried way that good things sometimes arrive. Without announcement, without apology, right on time. 13 months later, the Nina Adler Center for Veteran Recovery opened its doors on a clear October morning. The kind of morning the Carolina Piedmont manages 3 or 4 times a year, when the light turns everything, it touches a shade more real. Dara walked the front corridor when her knee allowed it, and on the days it did not, she moved slower and took in more of what was around her. The adaptive equipment visible through the gym windows, the soft, worn couches in the group rooms, chosen specifically because they did not look like the inside of a federal building, the photographs of the construction crew lined up, grinning in the lobby, like they knew they'd built something that mattered. Ajax walked beside her every day. He had learned, sometime in the first few weeks, that when Dara stopped in front of a particular door and took a breath before going in, he should press against her left leg until she moved again. He did this without being asked. He was very good at it. He was very good at all of it. The mornings when veterans came through the door, wearing the expression Dara knew from the inside. The sessions with the therapy team, the afternoons in the canine room, where men and women who flinched at sudden noises found it possible to sit still beside a dog who had also been to the difficult places and come back changed but intact. Nina Adler visited twice in the first year. The second time, she sat with Dara in the small office at the end of the North Wing, and they talked for 3 hours about things neither of them had said to anyone else. And by the time they finished, the afternoon light had gone amber, and Ajax was asleep across both their feet. Some connections, Dara had come to understand, do not begin with the moment you meet. They begin with a moment, years earlier, when one person decided not to leave, in a burning vehicle in foreign dust, or in a diner in the rain, or in an administrative building where someone was about to let the last thing they had slip quietly away. They begin with the smallest and most costly kind of courage, the decision to stay. And some things, once they find each other, require no explanation at all. They simply recognize, as Ajax had recognized with the wordless, irreducible certainty of a creature incapable of pretending, that they were always meant to arrive here together in the light.